Hello, everybody. Welcome on the Lights on Data show. Today, we're going to talk about cultivating data literacy in kids.
Awesome. Our wonderful guest today is Gulrez Khan. He's a data science lead at PayPal. He has been passionate about data for almost 20 years now, and he's been advocating for data visualization and storytelling with data in the community. He also speaks at conferences to democratize data. And our topic for today, he's also the author of the book Drawing Data with Kids, which we are very much looking forward to finding out more about. Welcome, Gulrez. It's good to have you.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me, George, Indiana.
Well, the pleasure is all ours.
Get right into the topic. What inspired you to write a book for kids? So the book is called Drawing Data with Kids. What led you to create this?
Yeah. So a lot of people ask me this question, and it goes back to a story, right? And if you think what happened during the COVID time, like our work life and the home life, like it merged, right?
Hmm.
Right now, I'm sitting at my home in my den, and I've told my kids, "Hey, don't make noise. I'll be on a podcast." What has happened, like in last 2 years, was my kid would come and they would be behind me, looking into my screen, peeking at those things, right? So one fine day, I was working on a visualization, and it was a tree graph that I was working on. And my 4 year son was playing in the background, and he said, Abu. So Abu means dad in our language. He said, Abu, this looks like a mosque. And I was focusing on my own thing. I thought he might have a Lego or something which he's showing. And he can then I looked at him and I said, what? Then he pointed at my screen and I said, mosque? How does it look like a mosque? And then, like, I tilted my head a little, and then, you see the tree graph, right? And it did look like a mosque. And that was refreshing, right? Because we tend to look at things because we are tuned in those things. But here is a refreshing perspective from a 4 year old looking into things differently. So that's when I started thinking that, hey, it would be good to have those conversation, like fun conversation with the kids around data and being passionate about data. Like I spend all my day working with data and during night time telling stories to the kids, right? So how I can merge these things together. So that's where I started doing some experiments with my kids. I've got three beautiful kids, a 11-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old now.
Congratulations.
So yeah, thank you. So it's a blessing, and we used to do this activity called drawing. Just do some drawing and not teaching, doing nothing. So just doing some painting, other things, and my kids would just bring papers and they'll watch me do things. They say, "Okay, you want this color? I'll bring that color. You want this paper? I'll bring that paper." So I'm not teaching anything. We are just having good time. But then that data person within me said, okay, why don't I add the data element over here? So that's where I started doing some activities of introducing bar graphs or line graphs and pie chart. So it's fun, like when you hear these terms from a 4 year old or a 3 year old, he will be eating rice and he created a pie chart, like just eating the quarter and say that, hey, Abu, I have a pie chart. And it's
Hmm.
music
Wow.
to my ears. So that, hey, wow.
I
So
love it.
that's
And,
where,
and
yeah.
drawing is such an accessible activity to everybody, and it's so interacting with the kids, and you're both learning together, and the kids learning from you. And
Yeah.
yeah,
So
it's such.
it's fun and it's also away from the computer or from a screen.
Exactly. Yeah. So we don't have a television at home. My kids are homeschooling, and my wife, kudos to her. Like, she left her corporate job, focusing just on the kids, and she spent lots of time with them. And she like says, "No, we don't need to add the screens right now." And I said, "Even for teaching?" And she said, "No, even for teaching. Can you do that without screen?" So that was
Mhm.
the challenge. Like, she threw at me, and I said, "Okay." And when I wrote the book, you'll see these different components coming in, right? The first component is about storytelling. So I'm a storyteller outside my day job. I do these corporate workshops where I teach storytelling and even data storytelling, data visualization. So those things, so it has a storytelling element. So every chapter has a story. The idea is not to just have some kind of jargons, just but engage kids. When I talk to kids about certain thing, they'll not listen. But last evening, for example, we were on a dinner table and my son was not very happy. I ate a little bit of his piece and he was crying. And then I said, okay, I tried to distract and I started telling a story. And they enjoyed, and one story after another story. So they had a good time. So with stories, you can get the engagement for the kids, even for adults, right? So that's why in my book, I have added stories in every chapter. Then there is a visualization, which is data visualization thing, which I am obviously teaching through that book. And then other thing is screen free. So that was the challenge that my wife threw at me, and I think that is really important because we are inundated with screens, right? Day
Right.
in, day out. If you are not on your laptop, you are on your phone, and same with the kids, right? So they will be getting screens, but this is my attempt to reduce the screen time and have some family activity and fun and learn together at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. And I think any parent educator that's listening, they would really enjoy these activities too to do with their kids. But Gulrez, how would you explain data literacy to kids?
Yeah, good question, right? Data literacy to kids. So when I think of explaining, I will not explain data literacy to them. So it's you show them, you don't tell them, right?
Mm,
So there are different activities that we do in our home. So for example, we have a board game night, right? So where the whole family we sit together and play, let's say, a game of Scrabble, right? So we play a game of Scrabble, and my oldest, she would write down the scores of each member in each round. Okay, and she does that, and but within the back of my mind, I would think of, hey, these are numbers. How can I convert this into some kind of a visual form and do some analysis with it? So the game is done. My son won the game, but then I would say, okay, and especially like my older daughter who is 11 right now, we say, okay, let's analyze this now. So when we start analyzing, you'll see, okay, I can create a bar graph of the different rounds, who was leading and all that. But then maybe massage the data and then add some kind of a running total for each participant, right? So in the first round, my daughter had 11 points. The next round, she got 7. So 11, then 18, and you'll see a line graph coming in.
right.
I'm not telling her anything about data literacy. I'm telling her like, hey, we played a game. Let's see what happened, and that's where like she's interested. So there is
Mhm.
an interest element because she just lost a game and she wants to know what happened, and that's where like we are looking at the graph together. And even my 3 year old and 7 year old, like they'll peek and say, okay, what's going on here? So again, like to answer your question, you don't teach them, you have fun with them, you do things with them, and through that they would have that understanding.
Right.
Another example which I think of, which was really exciting, the other day my daughter called me from the living room, and she was reading a book. She was reading a book about the birds, right? So the birds of North America, I think that's the title of the book. So she called me and I said, okay, what happened? And she showed me a graph. So that graph is actually called a sonogram or something. So through that, what they do is you identify the species of the birds based on like the frequency of their pitch, right? The pitch of the bird.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was scratching my head trying to understand like what that graph means. And she says, this looks like a snore graph from your book. So
Mm,
in my book, I have a chapter where we create a graph. I snore a lot, so she created a graph of that kind of a pattern. But look what happened, right? She had fun doing that exercise of creating a snore graph. Now, when she encountered a graph which was like not easy to understand, but still like she was able to relate what she learned in the fun and engaging way. And now that's a win for me, that hey, I'm patting my back that hey,
Definitely.
this works fine, right?
It's yeah, it's already clicking.
Congratulations. That's great.
Love it. Have you ever talked about pie charts and used a pizza to show the slices and everything?
Yeah, again, our family is a little different. My wife is on a healthy eating, so we not pizza, but we create pizza with watermelon, and you should try
Mm,
that.
mm,
So you cut watermelon in this format, like it's a circle, and then you can still cut it in a pizza format, and then you can put some toppings on it. So we have done those things. And again, another story, I was talking about my son, right? We read books together. So I was reading one book, my own book. I said, okay, let's read this book. And in that chapter, there was this story about pie chart. Like it was with a game of snakes and ladders, and then like we count the number of snakes and number of ladders, and based on that, I created a pie chart. Okay, and we read that book together. And next time, like evening, he's eating his dinner. And as I said, right, so he was eating rice which was in circular plate, and he just ate the portion, a quarter of it, and he
mm-hmm,
called that, hey, this is a pie chart. And as I
mm-hmm.
said earlier, like it was music to my ears that hey, my 6-year-old is now talking about a pie chart.
Mhm.
So these are like fun activities, but again, like the idea is not to teach them, but to make them fall in love with data, right? With these activities, like they would remember the good time they had with their father talking about these things, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it's yeah, it sounds like you're doing it in such a fun, engaging, easy way to grasp. And then as they're starting to encounter this in the real world, they're already drawing those relationships to what they've learned
Connections.
from your book, and it's not foreign to them. And surprisingly, I think I started to encounter like the bar graph, pie chart, and everything when I was maybe like in fifth grade at least. It
Mm-hmm.
took
I
a
mean,
while,
yeah, or
right?
older. Yeah.
To yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And why do you think it's important to cultivate data literacy from such a young age?
Yeah. So I know as parents, like a lot of us would think of sending kids to different classes. I see a lot of my friends sending kids to Python class or some other coding class. We all understand coding is important. But now, like when our world is inundated with data, we are talking about large language models and whatnot, right? Even now, when we are talking, all this thing is data, right? How many words I'm speaking, and someone can do natural language processing on number of times, like I repeated a certain word, right?
Hmm.
So there's data everywhere, and no matter what profession our kids would pursue, they would be dealing with data, right? So they would be creating the graphs, they would be reading the graphs, they would be analyzing the numbers. So it is very important that they learn about it at an earlier age. And again, I've met lots of parents, so like even the grown-ups, right? So they fear looking at a graph, right? So
Mm,
there is
yes.
this
Hmm.
intimidation that hey, a graph comes in and no, I don't want to look at it, right? So there is too much math in it or something.
Mm.
Yes, and I don't do
Scares them.
math. And I hear so many people, oh, I don't like math, and then they close themselves off to anything that has to do with the numbers and graphs and everything, which is sad. I find that everyone
They
has
probably
a
had a bad experience, maybe,
or a bad
or
teacher,
a bad
or
teacher.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
Yeah.
So, Rez, what are some key concepts or skills that you believe children should develop to become data literate?
Yeah, I think not just the kids, right? So when you think of data literacy, like it's for all of us, right?
Mm.
You mentioned that you come from change management background, right?
Yes.
So you still deal with lots of data. And one thing, as I mentioned, is like reading the different types of graph, right? So are you able to understand what's going on? The example that I gave was for my daughter, right? So looking at a graph, like she's not interested in a graph, but she happens to read a book about birds, which she's fascinated about. And the book has a graph. So what would happen if you're afraid of data? You'll not look into that graph and you lose that literacy on that front, right? So the ability to read and understand the different types of graphs, and then analyzing, right? So it's also important to analyze the numbers, and it doesn't have to be complicated, right? Uh, I remember like when I was learning data science, and there were these different type of data sets that we were dealing with. So those data sets would be something that I'm not able to relate. And for example, in our clustering course, there is this famous data set for iris flowers, right? So what are the different types of breeds of those flowers, and you create clustering based on the size of the petal and the leaves and all those things, right? And honestly, I haven't heard of that iris flower all my life, and that's why I'm learning a new subject which is foreign to me, and the instructor is speaking in a different accent, and this is all becoming too complicated for me,
Hmm.
right? So that's why if they start earlier in a subject that they are familiar, a game of Scrabble, or something else which they are feeling confident about. So that's where I think they start early. They are able to read the graphs, they are able to analyze data, and they are doing it for fun. I think that's most important, right? If you teach them, then it doesn't work. So you just leave them, sit with them, and work through that. It would be great.
Yeah, it's not. It doesn't feel like teaching. It feels more like playing, and then you're integrating that differently, and you have a different feel towards it as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
different opening
Mm-hmm.
and confidence later on, right? Because
Yeah.
just to your point, I remember my dad used to do math with me even
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning. I think even before school, and then when I got to school, I already felt confident, and I because he had taught me, he had told me, okay, you're doing this great, you're good at it, and then I started believing that, and whatever new thing was thrown at me related to math, I was confident that I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it opened up this world of math to me basically, and I think it applies to almost to every topic or any
Hmm.
topic. If you have a good experience to start with, then it opens up the that field to you
And it
Yeah.
for
worked for you.
later
You
harder challenges. Yeah, that's what I'm
used
saying,
to
that it
work.
works.
You used to go to like math competitions
Yeah,
and
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I
There
think
you.
it's thanks to my dad who gave me that confidence up front. Because if you have
Mm-hmm.
a not so good experience at the beginning, maybe there's something you can't do, or maybe the teacher says something that takes all the confidence, especially when you're at the beginning, then you might
Mm-hmm.
close yourself off to the topic. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure that your kids, whenever they're gonna see graphs and numbers and data, they're gonna feel automatically more confident. And I believe that through your book, every parent can offer that to their kids, which is great.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing this experience
No,
of
you
yours.
nailed it, right? So talking about your personal experience with your dad teaching you math, right? So you still remember that,
Yeah,
and that's how our mind works, right? So our mind would remember, try to relate things that happened in the past, right? You look into a graph, and maybe the memory that would take in for my kids is, hey, over the weekend we would do these exercises as a family together, right?
yeah,
So hopefully, like they would think of as good memories, and that will not they'll not shut their mind when they look into numbers. So I think it applies to anything, right? So it could be doing some other fun activities, doing gardening or something else. But again, having that experience would help, right? So that would yeah, come back.
Absolutely. And yeah, so we tackled the fact that creativity plays a really good role in teaching that data literacy for children. For children, they are integrating a lot better if you're including that creative play into it, and it's all part of a game, and it's fun, and you have that association from you're young, I think. But coming back to your book on drawing data with kids, what other creative approaches do you feel that it might bring to engage young learners?
Yeah. What I'm anticipating and what I'm seeing with some of those readers is they start to adopt these exercises that they can do in their daily lives, board games, right? Which is anyone can do that. So you are sitting, Instead of just watching yet another YouTube video or a movie, you are having fun as a family, and you are collecting data, and as a family together you are learning, right? So I also have lots of parents who reach out that, hey, I know your intended audience for the book or the activities as kids, but we are also learning in the process. So
Yeah.
that is like unintended audience for me. I didn't anticipate that thing, but since it is taught in an so easy way, right? Because these are board games, and then there is other activity that I have. One chapter is for maps, right? So we created a map of cherry blossoms, right? And the way we did it is again, like, this is also realistic fiction. So we were like in our backyard, a couple of trees of cherry blossom, and that's where like my 11-year-old, she was doing martial arts, so she was practicing, we are having fun, and we are looking into that cherry blossom flowers, and it reminded us of Seattle. Seattle has a beautiful scenery like during that time in University of Washington. And we are talking and said, okay, let's bring a map. So we brought a map, and we started putting those flowers at the places which are famous for cherry blossom, and
Mm.
that's your map, right? So this is another activity, no screen time, nothing, right? So you have a map, you're not doing anything, you're just putting the flowers, and that's where you have created a graph, right? Or a map. Another one that we did is when I was trying to teach them a heat map, how do you create a heat map? And we counted the number of letters for each state, and based on that we did
Mm.
red, yellow, and green. And they used crayon, and then they colored everything red, yellow, green based on number of letters. And you see this North Carolina, South Carolina, they would be in red because the number of characters, but then Utah would be green, right? So like that. And they didn't know what it is called, but now they know this is a heat map. These are different activities. Now with this book, again, it's not in the format of a curriculum, right? If I were to write a book of teaching data literacy, right, so maybe I would start with what is data, what are different types of data, what are the different chart types. But I don't want to do it that way. I want to make it as an experience, right? So those
Mm-hmm.
experience, there is a chapter, uh, a story. The story is about a father who is sleeping and snoring. His daughter wakes up, and she starts doodling, and she says, okay, I'll create a graph of his snoring. And that's how they are learning. So in the book I've got that story component, and then I also have these other things which I call as timeouts. So timeouts is a very small section where I talk about the particular graph type which is introduced, and that's the teaching which I'm doing over there. So people can look into it as a parent or as an educator. You say that, hey, you created a snore graph or a sneeze graph or a meow meow graph. Like, these are different examples that I have. And what does these graph mean? What other places can you use these graphs?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the idea.
Nice. And I know this is not the topic of your book, but we have a question here from Berto, and he's wondering if children can understand what data is sensitive and what data needs to be protected and things like that. Do you cover that at all in your play with them?
Not at this time, not in the book right now, but we taught as a parent or as a family. There is another activity that we do together, which I'm missing out right now. Like, we try to do it breakfast together. And when we do sit, we have breakfast together, every person brings a topic. And that topic could be anything. Can you still hear me? Yes, can
Yes,
you?
Yes, yeah.
yes.
Okay, okay, yeah. So yeah, so we have a topic. Every person brings a topic, and it would be like my 3-year-old. She would bring some topic, and all of us. So my wife, she tries to teach kids about how to be safe online, and then we were
Mm.
talking about how this thing works. I'm forgetting. So Amazon has this thing like, or like Siri, right? For example, I was forgetting the name for that. Alexa, right? So how does Alexa work? And so that's where we talk about certain things that, hey, what's happening when you speak, where would data go, right? And how can someone come in between you and Amazon? You trust Amazon, but then there is someone who can come between and get certain data or do those things. So right now, I haven't covered in that first book, but I'm hoping to write a series, and that's a very good question, Gilbert. That maybe we should cover in some place in the next book.
Yeah, enjoying data with kids too.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Protecting data with kids.
Yes, exactly.
But it's still
Yeah, yeah,
admirable
yeah.
that at such a young age you're really making them understand and at least be aware of the idea that hey, data needs to be secure or there is some potential of risks there. Be careful. Brilliant.
Very
Mm-hmm.
nice.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. Okay, so looking ahead, what do you envision for the future of data literacy in education? And I don't know, how can we continue to nurture and promote it? Promote
Yeah,
these skills, the data literacy skills among children.
yeah. So that's a very good question, and which I ask myself that how should we do that? Right? And I don't know if you're aware, like there is this thing called Hour of Code, right? Which is a non-profit or something, and then there is this lots of companies they participate, encouraging kids to code, right? So my vision is to have something like Hour of Data, right? So every week or with some cadence, people in all the schools everywhere they have this thing called Hour of Data, where everyone do these kind of activities. It doesn't necessarily have to be on the screens. It could be like doing some fun games. In schools they do a lot of fun games, so we do these activities of drawing data, and then people understand data at an early age, right? So that's my vision. Hopefully more and more kids they start understanding the different type of visualization, how to analyze the data, and also we are seeing a lot of misinformation and lying with data as well, right? So I hope my kids understand like how they can see like when someone is lying with data, like what are the
Mm.
different, or sometimes like it's mistakes. So these are normal
Hmm.
mistakes that you have cut the y-axis not starting from zero, and you're showing that hey, there is this big dip which happened, right? So I hope like more and more people understand that. And then that's a very good question that Gilbert asked earlier about security of the data, right? So that is also something that I hope we teach to our kids that hey, this is your data and how someone can make use of it, and data can go in wrong hands as well. So that's what I would think of.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Gulrez, thank you very much. I wanted to encourage everyone to follow you on LinkedIn, to have a look at the book Drawing Data with Kids. Thank you very much, everyone, for participating and for listening in, for watching this. And Gulrez, good luck with everything. All the best to your kids, to your family, and keep up this amazing work. And thank you for the contributions to the world of data.
Thank you so much for having me. I think you guys are doing wonderful job in bringing people together and giving a platform where people can share about these ideas. So thank you, and good luck to you as well.
Thank you so
All
much.
the best. Have a great weekend.
Bye
You
everyone.
too. Bye.